I would like to call this meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order. If you could all please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. We are back up and running, folks. The technical issues have been resolved. So you will find those videos on Facebook and YouTube. So getting into our meeting minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 18th, 2025 as written. So moved. Motion by Heather.
Second.
Second by Bill. Any questions or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? And I say yes, so that is unanimous. And on to bills and payroll. I would additionally accept a motion to accept the bills and payroll warrants as presented. Motion by Hank, second by Bill. Any questions about those bills or payroll? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? And I say yes, so that is unanimous. And I am very pleased to greet Isabel back this week, and we are looking forward to hearing your report.
All right, awesome. So I was actually put directly in touch with both the elementary and middle schools, so I have a lot more info for us tonight. So at the elementary school, I have heard that teachers are currently integrating the universal design for learning strategies to help students with engaging, expressing, and succeeding easier. They have a book vending machine reward system. And now I heard about this from a friend at first because her little brother goes to the elementary school. And I thought it was the coolest thing because like it not only promotes like good behavior, but also like reading. And basically it's like if a kid is good all week, they get a gold coin and they get to go to this vending machine and use the coin to pick a book from the machine. And I thought that was really, really cool. They participated in International Dot Day, Fire Prevention Week, and they did one of my favorite field trips from childhood, the Pumpkin Patch field trip, the annual fall field trip. And their beginning of year star, both math and English data, is looking fabulous. So, and then up in the middle school, they've had their first round of Student of the Month. They brought back an old tradition. Miss Landry was telling me that they had all of the new staff members of the middle school building lead the school in a YMCA dance. And I thought that was really fun. And then next week they have an anti-bullying spirit week going on. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was planning to actually like get a picture of the posters that they have up, but it slipped my mind. I got busy this week, but from the sounds of it, from what I've seen, they do like a day where they challenge you each day to compliment 5 people or say hello to 3 people or so on and so forth. And I thought that was like a really cute, like good way to promote kindness every week. So I love that. And then grade 5 is having a movie night on the 23rd. I believe they're watching Hocus Pocus. I thought that was cute because we did that last year as a fundraiser for my class. So that was fun. And then they're working on setting goals to improve progress reports using SMART goals. And they just started up the National Junior Honor Society for grades 7 and 8. Mr. Ivan's daughter is in that, and I was talking with her about it because she was talking about how it could be really useful for like all of her resumes and such. And she was asking me for like tips on like volunteering opportunities, and I thought that was really fun. So, and then grades 7 and 8 both have an upcoming dance. So And then up in the high school here, we have clubs are fully in swing. And then the seniors just recently did their senior marking spot painting this past weekend. The homecoming dance is tomorrow from 7 to 10 in the middle school cafeteria with a Starry Night theme. And I love the bracelets that they give us as tickets. They're really cute. And I thought it was really cool because my first ever dance, that was like kind of high school in 8th grade was Starry Night themed and it was in the cafeteria. So I was like, oh, it's like the seniors came full circle. So that was really cool. And then Warrior Fest is Saturday from 4 to 6 with a ton of cool booths in store, followed by the Saturday Night Lights football game. And for sports, field hockey is still doing really, really well. And the girls' senior night is next week on the 23rd at 6 p.m. And then varsity and JV football are doing really well. That was all I got for us, but I thought everything was looking really awesome, so.
No, that's fantastic. Any questions for our student rep? Yeah.
Busy times.
Busy time.
Very
Yeah, thank you so much for working with all the schools. It's great to hear what's going on across all the schools in our district and get that update. So really appreciate the extra time and effort that takes. No worries about not getting a picture this time. It's already just huge to just be hearing what's happening in the different buildings. So we appreciate that work.
Yeah, of course, it was really fun, so great.
Well, we hope you're able to stay this evening, but if you're not, please do feel free to just get off and exit when you need to. We understand you've got schoolwork and other commitments that might take you away from us, but otherwise we look forward to having you here.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Excellent. Okay, we don't have anyone from the public here this evening, nor do we have our NDEA rep, so we will skip over those agenda items. So I will move right into the MSBA project update. Is there any volunteers to give that update? Or do you want me to jump into what?
We can tag team.
Yeah, all right,
sure.
tag team.
So, we've been kind of on this traveling roadshow in between Templeton and Phillipston, and that's only because the information as it comes to us is not dribs and drabs, but it's all about the timing, and we're trying to meet with, of course, board of selectmen and to let them know what's going on. So last night, we met in Phillipston with the select board. It was a joint board meeting, the select board and the, if I was gonna say, finance subcommittee or finance committee, and really just outlined some of the basic parameters that we know for sure, right? So the MSBA, for example, requires you to commit to borrowing the entire amount, even prior to the whatever percentage that the MSBA is going to.
I'm gonna interrupt you just for a second. Our camera is saying that it's not working, Susan, so, I don't know if it's just the camera. Is the sound okay?
Is he recording still?
Yeah, I see recording still as well. But if it's still recording, then I'd say you're okay to keep going. I just want to make sure we have sound. That's just confirming. I can keep talking if that's, okay, we do. All right, so continue and we can, I apologize if folks are seeing something weird on the screen right now, but we do have sound, so we're gonna keep going.
So as an example, you have to commit to borrowing the entire amount. And that's just, it's actually a statute. So again, we went through that. We talked a little bit about the borrowing. We did a very quick kind of overview of why we need a new roof, because the finance committee wasn't at the initial meeting when we met with the select board.
Right.
So what we know is that the folks want things in writing. That's, I would say that what people want to know is, or what they want, is to make sure that whatever the promise is, whatever, that needs to be spelled out. We don't have a lot of the information yet because the MSBA hasn't, we have the, I guess, the draft PFA, project funding agreement, but it does not become law until the 29th of October. And at that point, we have language, we have, we have all the language ready, not only for the school committee, but for the towns, for the warrant and et cetera, et cetera. So we feel confident, they are going to entertain us with a special meeting, right? I'll call it a fall meeting, but it may not happen for a bit. What else am I saying?
Templeton, when we met with them a few weeks ago, they have a placeholder on their town meeting warrant for it. They're just waiting for us to send the official letter with the numbers in it. Phillipson is doing the same thing. They're just waiting until they get the letter before they decide. And then we have the 120 days from October 29th to get all of the town meeting and ballot votes done.
The one update I wanted to make sure we covered in this meeting is that since our OPM was here presenting the project, they did go back about the solar panels. And apparently the initial costs that we were quoted, which was $3 million some odd dollars, included both the structural prep for the building to be able to handle solar panels, but also the solar panels themselves. And so what has happened since then is that the project has been reduced by $2 million some odd dollars because to remove those solar panels, both because those are not covered by MSBA and we don't want those in the project when they're not covered. And so now it's just the solar readiness that we're paying for, which is again, just to repeat that for folks to understand, it's required as part of MSBA's process. So solar panels are now out, which reduces the total amount by $2 million some odd dollars. There remains $1 million some odd to make sure that the building is structurally ready for solar panels should we wish to install them at some later date. So, yeah. Did I get all that correct? All right. Yeah. I think that's all the updates we have for right now. Our next meeting will actually be in that first week of November so that we can get all of that finalized back over to the towns because it is a tight turnaround from that October 29th date, 120 days for the towns to hold their town meetings and vote the votes. So we want to be as supportive of that as possible. So it seems we still have sound, but camera is still not working, but we're gonna keep moving through. So Anne Marie, I'll hand it over to you for our FY26 budget update.
I think we have too much to report out on that. There's no new happenings. We just keep hearing that the revenue is not quite what the state wants it to be, but they're not changing anything as of yet. So 9C cuts could be on the horizon, but nothing has been done yet.
You never page can have changes, so.
I can see myself again, so. I'm glad to be back up and running, but not exactly sure what's going on with the camera because I saw a lot of raised hands as to what exactly might be happening, but we'll hope that that stays with us, but we're glad the sound is staying preserved. All right. So back to you, Anne Marie, for business manager's report.
We got approval on our special ed grant, so we can start spending in those now. We're still waiting
Okay.
on our title grants, which is Title I, II, and IV. We don't have approval on those yet. Other than that, it's pretty quiet grant wise. I encumbered all the salaries in September 1, so if you compare August to September, you'll see that there's a lot less on the bottom line. Other than that, just kind of everyone should have their initial supplies. Now we're gonna hopefully start watching and maybe looking at a budget freeze. Probably very soon.
I know we've covered the possibility or likelihood of happening at finance facilities, so. Now, turn it over to Ms. Super Chief for our curriculum and instruction update.
I have two presentations combined into one for you tonight, which is a lot of data. I'm excited to share with you both our 2025 MCAS data as well as our beginning of the year benchmark data, which is our internal data system. So just to start off, I'm gonna share from the changes from last year from the 2025 data set to the 2024 to 2025 data set from the state. And then I'll show you how that relates in terms of how we saw changes in our district. Then we'll go into student level data and then school and district level data. So at the state level, the state saw a 3% increase in grades 3 through 8 on ELA for students meeting exceeding, and a 6-point decrease in students in ELA in grade 10. Math, they're claiming, quote, some evidence of the impact from question 2 when they see math because they've seen either no change or a decrease. And so question 2 was the vote that discontinued the use of MCAS for competency determination. And so they're questioning essentially the decreases they're seeing at the state level in grade 10, possibly related to that outcome. In science, there's no change that they're seeing in the grade 5 data, and they're seeing decreases of 2 and 3% in grades 8 and grades 10. So we looked at those same patterns and trends with our data looking at 2024 and 2025, and here's what we saw. So we had an increase of 2% for ELA in grades 3 through 8, and we had a decrease of 8% in grade 10 ELA. However, while we had a decrease of 8%, we are 1% point away from where the state averages. We were at 50% of students meeting exceeding in the states at 1%. When we look at math, we had no change in math overall for grades 3 through 8, so we matched that growth the state had. And we had an increase in 3% of students in grade 10, which is positive compared to the state's decrease of 3 points. Science, we had a decrease of 7% points in grades 5 and 8 and an increase in grade 7, so we didn't see the same patterns as the state there. So let's actually dive in and say, what does this look like when we look grade to grade for our district? So we're gonna look at two different data sets. We're gonna look at the achievement levels for the state versus our district. So what we're really gonna look at is the bucket that combines students who met or exceeded on MCAS. So you'll see the percent of students who met or exceeded. And then we're also simultaneously gonna look at our district's growth. And the growth measure, and I apologize if you've heard me say this multiple years now, but the growth measure is measured in a percentile score called SGP, which is Student Growth Percentile. And so it's a score from 1 to 99, where anything between 40 to 59 is considered average or typical growth. And you can see anything lower than that falls into low growth or very low growth. Anything higher than that in a percentile is considered high growth or very high growth. So we'll look at those combined because it's interesting. It's hard to look at one without the other because they both tell a very important story for our populations. So statewide, when we look at the ELA results, you can see that for grades 3 through 8, they are mostly in the 40% of students meeting exceeding, with grade 5 being the lowest, and then our grade 10 statewide is at 51% meeting exceeding. As a district, we are below the state's average in all grades. You will see three cohorts here that have stars next to them. These have stars because we have seen a significant increase in that grade level from the previous year. So for example, the 32% of students meeting exceeding in grade 4 is an increase of 17 from last year for that cohort. That 28 for grade 6 is an increase of 3. And the 28 for grade 7 is an increase of 6. So we have seen some growth in grade level data over years that isn't necessarily represented when we look at this in isolation. So while we are, of course, a little disappointed to be below the state's average, what's exciting for us is across the board, every cohort's growth fell into the typical growth band. So while our students aren't at that same achievement level, they are making appropriate growth. So what we'd like to see is we'd like to start moving that so that our growth rates aren't above typical growth so that we can start to close that gap with us in the state. We were not across the board in typical growth last year. So this is a big win for us to see those SGP scores for all grades. You don't see a SGP score for grade 3 because grade 3 is the first year they take the test, so they don't have a growth measure until they take it again in 4th grade. When we look at the math scores for the state, you'll see statewide, again, they're mostly in the 40% of students meeting exceeding. When we look at our district's rates, again, we see a similar pattern where we are below the state in terms of the percent of students meeting exceeding. You'll see more numbers starred here. We've had 4 cohorts in math that have seen as a grade level to grade level significant growth. In 3rd grade, we're up 3, 4th grade's up 7, 8th grade is up 2, and 10th grade is up 3. We definitely have been leaning into this 5th grade cohort, and you'll see when we look at our benchmark data that this is actually, when we triangulate data and look at other data points, we are definitely seeing that this cohort is a cohort we really need to put some additional support in and lean into. So what's reassuring for us is that we have data points that are both showing a similar need. When we look at the growth for math, we see a little less consistency. So we see our grades 4, 8, and 10 falling into typical growth. Very noteworthy here, our grade 6 cohort for math is the only cohort we have that has exceeded or is in high growth. So that's pretty significant. You'll notice there are 2 cohorts here, the grade 5 and grade 7, that fell in low growth. So even though they fell in low growth, we dug a little bit deeper. And so I'm looking at like that 38 SGP score, which is low growth. Looking at last year, when that cohort of students was in 4th grade, their SGP score was 29. So while that is still low growth, it is a 9 SGP point growth or percentile point growth. So we're still seeing growth, but we're seeing them grow from being at this point in that low growth to this point in that low growth. So we're happy to still see movement, but we do need to do some work in those 2 cohorts in terms of growth for math. Science and civics data. And so statewide, when we look at the science data, you can see the percent of students meeting or exceeding is 46 for grade 5, 37 for grade 8, and 46 for grade 10. Statewide, the percent of students who met in 8th grade civics is 39. This is the first year that the state has done a civics assessment in grade 8. There are 2 components to that. There's a performance-based task, and then there's more of a traditional assessment of knowledge of the standards. And so when we look at our data, we see the same pattern. We are slightly below the state average in all of those. We did see in that grade 10 science 7 point increase. So we were happy to see that. While we can dig into a lot of the data in terms of question types, strand types, and so forth, we have limited data we can dig into for civics because it was the first year they released, and so they don't have as much public access data for us to dig into. So that's the student level data. We also out of MCAS have accountability data that is kind of getting up on the balcony and looking overall at each school and as the district as a total. And there are 2 components to that. There's criterion reference to data that's looked at, which is focusing on targets based on how we've been performing and growing for the last few years. And so the state identifies individualized targets that schools and districts need to meet, and then you receive, without going too deep down the rabbit hole of the data analysis there, essentially that boils down to 1 overall percent, and that is the percent that your school made towards its individualized targets. The second side of that coin is the normative data, which is like SGP, it's a percentile score, 1 to 99. And that is actually comparing your school or your district to DART schools, which are other schools that are similar in makeup and in demographics. And so we get 2 scores. We get a percent of our growth towards our target, and we get a percentile compared to our other schools. So when we look at the percent or growth we've made towards our targets, District-wide, we're at 41% towards our target, which puts us in a bucket of making moderate progress towards our targets. TES has made 56% towards their target. This is notable because they were at 47% towards their target last year. This bumps them up a category. They are now at substantial progress towards their targets. And so that is a huge win for us to see for TES. Our middle school is 25% towards our targets. Pardon me, and our high school is 35%, both also falling in the moderate progress towards our targets. When we look at the accountability percentile, if you remember, those of you who've been on the board, in the past, last year and the year before, we were really keeping an eye on this number for TES because we were hovering around that 20 percentile score, and this is exciting for us to share. TES has hit the 25th percentile, so this is the highest accountability percentile score the building has seen since it opened. So that is significant for us, very significant. It aligns with the progress we're seeing towards their targets. It also aligns with the internal measures that we're seeing when we're tracking student progress with our STAR benchmark and our DIBELS assessment. Middle school dropped a few percentile points. It's at the 27th percentile, and our high school remained pretty stable at the 59th percentile. So we know from some of the data points we're looking at that we have to really lean in and do some substantial work at our middle school. As you've heard Isabel talk about with students making individual goal setting SMART goals right now, focusing on their individual progress for academics. That's an example. So here are the categories of classification for school support from DESE. And as you can see, we fell into moderate progress for 2 of our schools in our district and substantial progress for TES. So that means based on our MCAS accountability that none of our schools are currently requiring assistance or intervention from DESE. So that's a big sigh of relief and a big, testament to the work that's been done in our schools to help support student growth and student achievement. Are there questions about MCAS before I dive into our benchmark assessment data? I'm also going to take that as an opportunity for a quick.
I think the only thing, one of the things we've been watching and reviewing is that grade 5 through 7 was highly impacted by COVID during their early foundational skills years, those elementary years. So that's been that set of folks as we've watched them move up through grades. We've seen some similar patterns. So seeing some progress there is excellent. And also, as you said, even more work to be done to ensure that challenge is something we can help them to overcome as much as possible before they graduate.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of different conversations about that. And, it's sometimes when you're looking at achievement level data, it can be super deflating. So for us really leaning in and looking at where are we seeing growth?
Yeah.
And how do we celebrate those wins with growth and then build off of what's working to help strengthen that continued progress towards that achievement score, but really focusing on our students making appropriate growth, and if not, what do we need to adjust or do differently to support them? I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So our benchmark assessment data, BOY stands for beginning of year. And so at the beginning of every year, we utilize 2 assessment tools in the district to assess all students, and we assess them in reading and math so that we have an internal measure to say, how are they doing at this point in the year, and how might we use this data to help us either put in place supports and interventions or enrichments for students. And then we track that 3 times a year. So we do beginning of year, middle of year, end of year, and students may be assessed in between those periods to track progress more specifically to their individualized goals as well. So at the elementary level, one of the tools we use is DIBELS, and DIBELS assesses early reading skills. Things like at kindergarten, do students understand the names of the letter, and do they understand the sound that's associated with that letter? Can they identify and tap out sounds of words, and then moving up to can they read a paragraph fluidly and with appropriate poise? So in this situation, our DIBELS assessment has shown us that across the board, when we look at K to 3, we're at 44% of students meeting or exceeding. So when you look at that kindergarten data, don't be alarmed. This is typical for us. We typically see when kindergartners first come in the beginning of the year, we typically see data sets that show that a lot of kindergartners are not yet meeting benchmark. When we track that over time, what we typically see is a change, because this is an assessment that's given one-on-one. Sometimes when our kindergartners come in and start the year, they're shy, they're nervous. And so while this is, having over half of your kindergarten class not meeting benchmark at the beginning of the year, when we look at the past few years, this is not usually indicative of what we see for growth patterns middle of the year and end of the year. So, but overall, we look at this and then we celebrate, and then what we do is we utilize this data to say how are we going to use our win blocks and our intervention staff to help support where there might be gaps for students with early literacy skills, and then how might teachers also adjust or inform their core instruction with students if we have certain, let's say, letters or keywords that students are working towards that may need some extra attention in the classroom.
And can you just remind me what a win block is?
Yes, thank you. WIN we love acronyms, right? So WIN is an acronym for what I need. And some schools call it WIN with two N's, and it can sometimes be called what I need now. And it's essentially a block of time in addition to core instruction, where students can get small group instruction, extension work or enrichment work. But it's when kids can be either supported with a push-in or pull-out model, and they're not missing their reading block or their math block, for example. So it's an additional block of time for interventions and enrichments. When we look at our STAR reading data, what's really exciting for us to see is that across the board, all grades are at or above 60% of students meeting exceeding with our internal reading assessment. One thing to note is that this assessment was renormed last year. So while we can look at this compared to last year's beginning of year data, we wouldn't go past that because of the new norms. So in looking at this, one thing that we've been leaning into as a team has been really looking at the 6th grade cohort, because we have seen a few different data points that really shine a light on this cohort. When we look at, we've also been looking at where we're maybe needing some support for interventions or in some cases, students on IEPs or students with IV plans or whatnot. So we've definitely been looking at who makes up this class and what supports do we have in place or not have in place. When we look at our STAR reading growth data, we had just under 1,100 students take the beginning of the year STAR test. Of those students, 71.4% of them fell into typical or high growth for this assessment. And so we're seeing a trend where we're seeing growth while we might not be seeing as much achievement. So that's really promising for us to see that this is the first time I think that I can remember that we've had over 70% growth rate for reading. So this is huge for us because reading has been a focus for a few years now. When we look at our math data, we have some kind of different patterns here. I would say look at grade 1 with a little bit of hesitation, because this is the first time students take this assessment. And so like we see with kindergarten Nibble data, we tend to see lower data for the first round. Before this, our students take the STAR early literacy assessment, which embeds math practices within a literacy assessment. So this is the first time they actually are exposed to or take this assessment. So if you can imagine, if you're in a first grade classroom, it's like, I forgot my, how do I log in again? Where do I find it? It's a little bit chaotic for the teachers running around trying to help students work their way through the assessment. And I don't say that as an excuse, but I just say that to say, we see this pattern quite a bit, and it's a little bit harder to kind of look at that data point up there because we know there's a lot that goes into that. But that being said, it does show we've got a need, in first grade. We really are leaning into the 6th grade cohort. If you maybe remember from a few slides back, this was last year's 5th graders, and last year's 5th graders on the math MCAS, we had 13% of that class who met or exceeded. So we know the current sixth grade math is something we really need to lean into and something we really need to, unpack, which we've been doing. Lisa Parker, who's our sixth grade math teacher, who, by the way, also was the only teacher who showed high growth on last year's MCAS, notably, has been emailing me left and right this week. Can you also share the constructed response questions? She has been digging so far into the question types and the standards, and really has been unpacking what's going on more than just score with her data. So I say, and she's not the only one, but I use her as an example because it's the cohort of kiddos that we're looking at. And then when we look at growth for math, we're seeing, again, close to 70%, but we are at 68.9% of students who are at that typical or high growth for this assessment. So with that said, that's a lot of data. But I do want to assure you that our teachers have been working really hard, leaning in and looking at individual students. Our principals have looked at we have a low performing cohort, which every school district on MCAS has a low performing group that DESE identifies. So our principals have been unpacking with students in that group and working with teachers on intervention planning or classroom supports to make sure those students are supported. Our department heads. Our teacher leaders have been working on either looking at specific item level data that we have released items from the state that we can look at and we can see what are some errors that our students are making or common misconceptions. And then how do we plan for that in our instruction? How do we address that in our classrooms? And then additionally, we're using our STAR data, which you saw a snapshot of, to really say, how are our kiddos right now, knowing MCAS was done last year, where are our kiddos right now and how do we use that information to help us make sure we're planning to meet their needs in core classrooms and in supports through interventions, enrichments, and or other services that students receive.
Any questions? After all that data. Well, please pass through our recognition of all that growth in, helping to get towards those targets. I think that's huge, and you're right that looking at the data in comparison to the state can sometimes make you just sit there and feel frustrated, but then to see just how much we're growing towards, accelerating that growth towards those targets is a huge amount of work. And so please pass along our recognition to the teachers that are digging in and supporting our students and helping to make sure that we have, successful grade level performance across the board.
Thank you. I just want to end by saying, we are incredibly proud of the growth we're seeing in the accountability data for TES. And those students are moving up to our middle school. So like you were talking about the bubble of kiddos who were, affected by COVID. We are working really hard to address that as well. But our long-term, what we're seeing for growth and for movement towards achievement is very promising. So very excited to see that.
Absolutely. All right. I know we were expecting some surplus items this evening, but those did not come in on time.
Next one, this then.
Not a problem. All right, so we have some policy updates, and just to give Ms. Superchi another moment, I will give an intro. So typically for folks who are new, when we do policy reviews, we do a first reading and then we do a second reading. And so we do the first reading in one meeting, and then in the following meeting, we do a second reading, and then following the second reading, we adopt the policy change. So that gives time and space for folks to review, propose changes, etc. Well, every once in a while, DESE or some other state level organization comes in and says, you must adopt a policy within this unreasonable timeline. And they demand that we have it on our books by a certain date, whether or not it follows our typical protocol. And when that happens, you see an item on the agenda that asks to basically suspend the first reading in favor of second reading, such that we can get the policy and make sure that we stay in compliance with state demands. Otherwise, I'm going to hand the the policy description of what this is back to the folks who are in either the operations subcommittee as well as to you, Ms. Superchi, since I know you were very directly involved in getting this ready.
So the first policy on the agenda is the CTE, recruitment, admissions, and retention policy. CTE stands for I always say college, career technical education. And so essentially, this is related to our voc tech programming, our vocational technical education, of which we have two sort of options in that realm. One option is that students can enroll in Monty Tech if they're accepted and unenroll in Narragansett, so they become students at Monty Tech. The other is through our MVP Academy, which is Montechusett Vocational Partnership Academy. And that is the collaborative program that we put in place starting last year, where we have a handful of seats for juniors and seniors to engage in plumbing, carpentry or electrical. We're in the process of writing a grant to add plumbing. And so with that program, we had already established and brought forth to the committee a process for enrollment and recruitment. But what DESE's telling us now is we need to have a policy, an actual school committee policy now, that is in place for recruitment, admissions, and retention of students in voc tech programs. So that includes both Monty Tech and our MVP Academy. So what you'll see in this policy is an overview of what our processes are in that. So, you'll start off by reading that, equal educational opportunity clauses, basically identifying that all students have access to these programs. And then you will see, as you continue down, who's eligible for these programs, how do we go about in our district recruiting and advertising for these programs, which essentially we do for both programs in a very similar way. We have an 8th grade course that all students take for it's called College and Career Exploration. And as part of that course, students understand and learn about the option of Monty Tech as well as the option for MVP Academy. We do field trips to Monty Tech where students can go on site and visit the program. Monty Tech send the bus, and our students in 7th or 8th grade can go and see what Monty Tech's all about to see if they want to apply. Our guidance counselors support students in the process of either applying should they decide to apply, or going through the application process if they're interested in MVP Academy. So we do quite a bit of advertisement. We also do parent info sessions for both programs at night so parents can attend. Typically those are virtual, sometimes they're in person. We tend to get more, when we do them virtual, we tend to get a little bit more engagement from parents and families. You'll also see, as you go down here, some nuts and bolts about what if a student transfers in, what if they're school choice, what if they're homeschool, and so forth. A lot of this language is directly from DESE's model policy that they provided to districts in this process. And then what you'll see throughout this is where we had to reference Monty Tech's processes, we linked directly to theirs because we didn't want to copy and paste their procedures into our policy, because then if they change them, we're out of compliance. And they encouraged us to do this. So we linked to their selection process, to their lottery system, and so forth. So that's essentially what this policy is in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, no, I would hand it over to you just to say, like, this went to the subcommittee first, were there any concerns raised, any particular points of discussion that you want the committee as a whole to know about?
The policy committee reviewed the policy. We had no concerns with the policies as they were presented. In fact, one of the things that we liked about the CTE is specifically with the MVP Academy was the lottery system. If the number of seats is exceeded, so it creates a level of fairness for all the students to join the MVP Academy.
Great.
I just had a potential proofreading question. On page 4 of the PDF, were those under transfer students, is it purposefully just leaving the placeholders for district, or did we just miss the?
No, I missed that, and I'm happy to update that.
Yeah, we could just, we need to note it in the one,
Yeah.
We haven't had a motion.
motion, wrong word.
You say that was on my.
Page 4, it's the transfer students, the second section.
It's a great catch, actually.
Yeah, that pulled things in, okay. And that's just gonna be the same contacts from the district, yeah.
So any questions before we put a motion on the floor, or are we good to proceed? Alright. So I would entertain a motion to suspend first reading and accept the following for second reading. Including a modification to page 4 under transfer students, where it says district and contact info in brackets, it will be replaced. For the career technical education CTE admissions recruitment and retention policy.
So moved.
Motion by Heather,
Second.
second by Bill. One last time for any questions or comments about that policy. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, abstained, and I say yes, so that it is unanimous. Okay, next we are back to our typical process here. So I'll give a little bit of the background on this. So when there was the vote by the state of Massachusetts, by residents of the state of Massachusetts to remove MCAS as a graduation requirement. This, of course, necessitated updates to the graduation requirement policy. We expected at the time that we made those changes, that there would be additional changes coming in through the course of this year, because of course, everything happened very quickly. And so I would hand it over to you, Molly, to review what those additions and changes are. And then Bill, would love to hear from you about anything that came up in that subcommittee.
So first and foremost, when Desi provided additional guidance at the end of the summer for competency determination policies, we realized we're actually in a pretty good place. Our policy did take quite a bit of what was in the new guidance already into account. There's really 3 major areas that we updated. The first being that they added a requirement for competency determination, starting with the class of 2027, to include US history. So previously, they had said we only needed to include English 1 and 2, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Biology. They've now added US history. So interestingly, this was already a requirement for us under graduation requirements. It just wasn't a requirement under competency determination. So we did add that to reflect, starting with the class of 2027, that's a now competency determination requirement. Additionally, we had to update a little bit of the language for alternative means for competency determination for students with disabilities, including the role of the IEP transition team. Pardon me, we added that language, and then we added a blurb too about how we would support English language learners in that process, which we were absent of in our last policy. And then more noteworthy in terms of a process that we didn't have in our policy prior was what happens for former Narragansett students who did not earn a diploma because of the competency determination with MCAS between the years of 2003 and 2024, which were the years in which the state provided competency determination based on MCAS. So we had to say, okay, if a student comes, if a previously enrolled student who received a certificate of attainment but not a diploma comes forward and is asking for us to now review and say, are you now eligible for a diploma? This is the process we would utilize to go through this. It's interesting, this has been a large topic of conversation amongst a lot of local districts, and I'm only aware of one district who has had a student request that they have their transcript reviewed and go through this process. But we now have the process outlined and in place in our policy, or will if it's approved by the committee, so that we would be able to move through that process should that happen here.
Anything from the subcommittee?
The policy subcommittee reviewed it. We had no concerns with the policy, we took note of everything you just stated, including took note of the alternate pathway for students with disabilities, so ensuring equitable access for a diploma.
So Oh, I entertain a motion to accept the following for first reading as presented. Policy IKF, graduation requirements.
So moved.
Motion by Heather,
So,
second by Bill. Any questions or comments about the updates to that policy? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, abstained, and I say yes, so that is passed for first reading, and we'll make sure that is on the next school committee meeting where we're reviewing business.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Okay, so we do also have a new stipend position for the NDEA contract. I'm not sure who was speaking to that one tonight, so you don't.
I'll start if you don't mind, then just finishing up with the particulars. So we had a retirement at the high school. And she was a part-time employee, it was with us for almost I think 5 or 6 years. But she did a great job with tutoring and mentoring program that we have kind of embedded. And she really did an outstanding job creating. Now, she was a powerhouse. She was a former assistant superintendent in this district after she retired. So she had, just a really good handle. So she was able to do a lot of different things. So unfortunately, we could not bribe her any longer not to retire. And so she had part of the role that one of the many things that she did is that she, in essence, we call them academic coordinator, but she would go around to each of these teams and to the teachers and to really identify what students need. It was a lot of collaboration and really a lot of scheduling and a lot of cutting through some red tape to figure out schedules. And it was quite a bit of work. So we haven't found that person. Like if we were to recreate that role, Patty's role, we haven't found that person yet. But what we can do and what we should do is create a position in which a lot of the organizational work can be done, because there's quite a few kids. I don't remember how many now, but
I don't know off the top.
yeah, it was again the number fluxes too, because it might be you might have a bad semester, a bad quarter. It's pardon me, and you just need some to be pulled in. So the numbers do fluctuate, but there's a lot of report writing, etc. So in any event, when the NDEA came to us and said this thing is kind of falling through, the teachers really like this because it helps everyone out, especially the kids. We talked about creating this sub position, right? Not sub as a substitute, but kind of this stipend position to help the organization until we can really figure out how, what, who, where, why, that, the bigger role or Patty's role once was, which was grant funded, by the way. So with that, we, in looking at the stipended structure, in terms of the coordinator, she falls into the sheet.
Yeah, we have a section in our contract already called academic coordinator stipends, which are all listed for $2,210. And so putting this stipend under that subheading makes sense. So as Dr. C mentioned, adding an NRHS academic coordinator stipend makes the most sense. We've already met with Eric and Lisa, with our union reps, and we're all in agreement.
And part of it in the contract, it says that one of the things that we can do per the contract, new stipend positions will be recommended to the superintendent, which it was. A short proposal, which it was. New stipend proposals will be due to the superintendent by December 1, as well. And I can waive whether or not we can consider it for the following year. We want to waive that because we need it now. Again, we just really haven't been able to figure out a way to kind of recreate Patty's position at this point in time. So that's what we're asking for. And we would put it in place immediately. So that way we can start organizing a lot of the work that's already been done. And people have picked up loose pieces of this just to keep it moving, but we need to get somebody in place to actually,
Essential person.
yeah, make a central person.
And Dr. C, can I add, this would not be adding money to our general fund because the grant that we had utilized to fund Patty, we no longer have that same amount, even close to the same amount of money, but we do have the funding to support this stipend out of that grant.
Okay, thank you. That was the key part.
Thank you.
In case you're wondering, it's the nursing grant that we get, that's funding it.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the appropriate action for adding academic coordinator for Narragansett Regional High School academic coaching stipend to the NDEA contract for the period of 2025 to 2028. Motion by Hank, second by Heather. And I said appropriate action here, just to clarify, because we were clarifying with the union at the time that we wrote this of whether it needed to be an MOU or some other methodology. So I'm trusting that the central office is just gonna take whatever they determine is appropriate action with the union to get that added into the contract.
We'll be posting it and
Yeah.
we'll do all the other
Yeah.
pieces.
Exactly. So, any other questions or comments before we move to a full vote? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? And I say yes. So that is unanimous. So before I hand this over to Dr. C, I'm gonna give a little bit of context for this next item. To consideration to rename the Thanksgiving Trophy for Narragansett Regional School District. This is not something that typically falls under the school committee, but I, in collaboration with Dr. C, made the decision that it was important to bring this in front of school committee for discussion. But ultimately, there's no vote. There's nothing we're voting on this evening, because it doesn't fall under our purview, but, looking for support and conversation and making sure that we have this public space to do that. So, Dr. C, I will hand it over to you. I know you're going to read.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's unfortunately a fairly long letter. It took this much to kind of get it all out there. So I apologize. I'm doing my best. Then all of a sudden I've got a cold all of a sudden. To blame Mr. Percy for that. Okay. And so, dear members of the school, in the spirit of celebrating the long-standing Thanksgiving football rivalry between Narragansett Warriors and the Murdoch Blue Devils, I'm pleased to share the creation of a new tradition that reflects the best of who we are as a district. In collaboration with the athletic director, Mr. Bond, high school principal, Colby Young, and the Antonalis and Rice families, we established a directory, which I am presenting for your review and consideration. See, the award is named in memory of two longtime devoted athletic directors, Peter Antonalis, former athletic director at Murdoch High School, and Ken Rice, former athletic director at Narragansett Regional High School. Ken, Mr. Rice, as far as I've always known him to be, spent 27 years at Narragansett High School as an athletic director, teacher, and coach. He led many successful teams in baseball, football, and basketball, and as the athletic director, he helped expand the sport program at Narragansett into the program that we know today. Ken cared deeply for others, and his life's work was supporting student achievement and community involvement through athletics. Pete Antonalis, who I knew very well, spent 40 years in the Wichita Public Schools, 30 of those years as the athletic director. He coached Murdoch High School football, basketball, and baseball. Peter was a recipient of the President's Award of Merit from the Massachusetts Secondary School and BMI. The Director's Award will feature the names of the two most valuable players, one from each school, as well as the final score of the game engraved on the trophy each year. I didn't put this because the letter was long enough. The individual coaches pick those from each team, so just give a little background to that. More than just a symbol of competition, this award celebrates the shared history, sportsmanship, and leadership of both programs, while also reflecting the enduring values of personal integrity exemplified by the two gentlemen in honors. As part of the new tradition, and after much reflection, I am seeking the committee's support in the district's decision to no longer accept or participate in the presentation of the Music Trophy. This decision applies solely to Narragansett and is not intended to involve or influence Murdoch High School in any way. We respect their autonomy and understand that they have every right to continue their traditions they see fit. Over the past several months, there have been escalating actions by Mr. Measure that have directly targeted members of our football program, including our coaching staff and administration. These actions have included public allegations, direct communications with parents, formal complaints to outside agencies. While filing such complaints is entirely within his right, I am happy but not surprised to report that each complaint has been reviewed and resolved, no findings of wrongdoing on the district. Recently, we have confirmed that Mr. Major reached out to at least 3 opposing football programs before their scheduled varsity program against Narragansett, warning them about one of our assistant coaches and urging them to reconsider competing against Narragansett. This ongoing pattern of conduct reflects a personal vendetta that extends far beyond any pursuit of closure for an incident that occurred nearly 20 years ago. It now appears aimed at discrediting and punishing the coach, as well as student athletes and staff who had no involvement in, and in many cases, were not even born at the time of the incident question. Allowing Mr. Beasley to present or for the district to remain associated with the Beasley Trophy in any capacity creates an unnecessary risk, both in terms of safety and perception. Doing so can convey a message that conflicts with standards of respect, integrity, and accountability that our district strives to uphold. As educators and community leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that every aspect of our program, including the traditions we honor, reflect those core values who provide a positive example for our students and families. The school committee plays a vital role in setting the tone and direction for our district, particularly when it comes to modeling the values we wish to instill in our students. This course of action aligns squarely with the shared responsibility. By supporting this decision, we collectively affirm our commitment to fostering an environment grounded in dignity, sportsmanship, and respect for everyone. I thank you for your thoughtful consideration. I would add, or I'm sure that there might be some questions, that when one reads this, and so Peter's not here to he sent me an email, and I want to, but I can't, Madam Chair, to talk. It's obviously it's public record, but he was generally supportive of the letter, but was worried about how bringing up some of the reports against the district might look retaliatory. And I have to tell you, I was thankful that he asked and brought that up, because clearly, when you think about that, it certainly could be perceived as something to that effect. But I want to say, though, the concerns that arose around this general situation, I'll just cover that, including questions of conduct and safety, really gave us an opportunity, quite frankly, to step back and reflect on what our traditions, awards, and public recognition and all that truly stand for. So when we're thinking about, okay, so we've got this issue, but why do we do certain things that we do? What do they stand for? And or maybe whom they stand for, depending. As a district, we have a responsibility to ensure that everything associated with our program reflects our core values of respect, integrity, accountability. So the reflection really led us, the group I talked about earlier, right, identified, to move us in a new direction, kind of reinforce those values and focus on the people and principles that have possibly shaped this program. And again, and specifically we're talking about football, right? So, as we're thinking about this, and for that reason, we really started to think about the whole piece of who we are and why do we play America. We don't want to get existential or anything like that too deep, but what are we doing, right? We're playing football. In the grand scheme of things, maybe it's not that important, but for 22 kids out there, right, a bunch of coaches and parents, etc., it's very important. It's an important part of their career, and we started to think about who got us there in a weird way, like who got us to this point where we're playing football. And it was really obvious that the two gentlemen that I mentioned, and I can speak for Mr. Antonellis. I cannot speak for Ken. I'll have to look into this. I want to think that he was here for the first Thanksgiving game against Murdoch. It was in 72, 73. I haven't, then he was the athletic.
As a student.
A historian.
Yeah, well, I was a student, so.
Okay, again, I wasn't sure exactly when. He was definitely here, but so we really have the two athletic directors whom were part of,
It began.
when it became. And just as an aside, in talking to both families, who I, of course, reached out to, is I certainly didn't want to use their name. And vote for me without permission, of course. Both were just completely floored and honored when I was talking to them. But I did learn from Mr. Rice, Skip Rice, and son, that Peter and Ken lived in Michigan. But they were really good friends, like in real life, right? So again, it's a small area, so it really is just really, I guess, surreal for him to think that this, you know, two good friends, of course, on opposite sides of the fence, we talk about football. So, without it, yeah, sure, it certainly started with something, with this, an incident, right, or something, but it made us think about what do we do just in general and why do we do it? And when we started to rethink some things, it made all the sense in the world to create this award. And so that's how we got here. But I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure, that I wrote this in, and so that way, first off, so folks could hear it, but certainly you would have time to ingest it prior to the meeting, because it was really obviously something we've been thinking about, but it really took, it really gained momentum to us, say 3-4 weeks.
We'll open it up to folks if we have questions or comments or statements.
Fine gentlemen.
Yeah.
Have loved their community and kids. I know Peter from Reputation, but Ken, pretty good. Can't think of anyone better than have it named after him. So.
When I was speaking to Skip, so I knew Mr. Rice, not only as he would.
I got the
Happy on the head if we lost badly or something. But I knew him from the neighborhood because he was, and when I said Mr. Rice several times in speaking, Skip, I said, I should never call him Chance. Never call him, you know what I mean? So it was funny, being 58 years old, going, yeah, Mr. Rice, I would just never think to call him Ken ever again. But
I got the call from Ken after 30 years on the committee. So
yeah, I certainly did that.
Lloyd was coach, so
Yeah, sure. So that's what I had, and I wanted to make sure that I was just, transparent, fun, and who I spoke with, well, again, the committee, so to speak, of course, the people who would be involved, obviously the building principal, the athletic director, two families would call, I called them first before I even started to pen the letter to be very candid, and I wanted to see what they thought of this. Again, they were on. So I did speak with Lynchburg Public Schools. I personally went and spoke with the superintendent, athletic director, explained on very broad terms, very broad terms about mostly dealing with this is what we'd like to do. And again, it's Narragansett Award. I want to be clear that we have no power, nor would we even think to somehow vanquish the trophy. In terms of Narragansett, we're just going to step away from that. Murdoch is absolutely, they have their own traditions. So I want to make sure I really, pound that home that this isn't, someone saying, well, you got to do it. That's not true. And I just explained why we're doing it. They were very appreciative of us coming up and talking to them personally about why we were doing it. And very honored that Mr. Antonos would be on the trophy, but given the fact that they started, the Turkey Day game way back when, it made no sense.
No, thank you for taking the time to put that together and giving us this platform to view it. I mean, it's been wonderful to sit here and hear all the additional context around who these gentlemen are and what they mean and the start of the Thanksgiving Day games. So I think it sounds like it's a great time to start honoring them, to make sure that the people who started that tradition are now permanently a part of it. I think that is a beautiful thing, and I love the celebration that brings, and hope, though we have a few younger folks on our football team today, hopefully they can appreciate that legacy and that tradition.
I know that their parents know who Mr. Rice is. For example, I was in Mr. Antonellis, obviously.
So. Anything else on that past item, or are we good to move on? All right, we are good to move on. So I'd say, while we're not voting, you have support from the committee, as no one has voiced any negative perception. If I am misspeaking for anyone, this is your chance to speak up.
Thank you for sharing your reflection with us, because now we get to highlight these two individuals.
Yeah, it's gonna be really neat. I don't like our student representative. I'm gonna tell you that directly. I wish she was here because she takes all of my fun. So as she was going through this report, I'm I'm not joking, going. So we need to, we need to scale it. She's fantastic. It's the first time I think we've had a student representative talk about data. Who's she talking to? She's not here, but I will see her tomorrow, and I didn't want to break her stride, but we need to really calm it down. So, she's doing fantastic. What I do have to say, which I didn't have to, I guess, cross out, is that I have to talk about the pumpkin patch. Look, if you don't know about the pumpkin patch, the TPS kids, it is just absolutely the greatest thing I've ever seen. It is amazing. Every year I go down there and go, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. 9 years in a row for me. It is fantastic. The kid, even the fourth graders, because they're fourth graders, they've done this before, don't you know? But even, but they just come into that with energy that they did when they were first graders. It's really cool. And gosh, I have 100 stories I could tell them, just discerning the person who's gonna take 15 minutes for that perfect pumpkin. It's unbelievable. And it's run fantastically well. And it's just, thank you, Lions Club. It is absolutely, it's awesome in every single way. Speaking of TES, the student council, which will be formed, I believe, this week or
Next week.
Next week. Okay.
Yeah, the letters have to be in by tomorrow.
It's
Next week is the voting.
it's something. I'll tell you what, I've been part of it, and it's really neat to watch. But I need to inform the school committees, as I'm told, to inform you that one of the very first items on the ballot for TES Student Council will be to undertake a vote, a campaign, as it were, to decide a mascot for Templeton Elementary School. Now, I looked at Miss Susan and said, what do you mean we are the Warriors? And she said, well, every elementary school has a mascot. I had to say that back in 1974 or 5, when I was in third grade, we got to decide that we were going to be the Memorial School Panthers. Now, what I understand is that has changed since then. But Marcy did a fantastic job and gave me 12 elementary schools in the area that have all different kinds of, oh my God, penguins, sharks, all kinds of things. And it's a really great way to have the student council, go through the process of getting out there and, or not just the student council, but listen, I want to be a dolphin. And so you need to go out there and let's talk about dolphins and talking about voting and everything. So this will work in with art as well, because there'll be, there's t-shirts, of course, merch, because Lord knows. So what I said to her, I said, absolutely, okay. I said, and they are going to come and present the student council. Once they're formed and everything is all done, they are going to come up and they're going to present to you on the finals, and they will unveil at that moment in time what TES will be. I'm not sure what it'll be. So I think it's really neat, and it's a great way to, a lot of civics obviously involved in this, and a very exciting thing to do that. So I give you farewell that we will be coming. At some point, it will, of course, think to do. On a more serious note, or just there's nothing serious really, is that both towns have approached us about covering the cost of meetings. What do I mean? In terms of
MSBA.
Yes, for the MSBA, the vote. Now, Templeton already has a meeting already on the books, but the request is that for the voting, we would pick up the cost, because they don't have a voting item, next May or whatever. We have to vote sooner than that.
For the ballot.
For the ballot.
For the ballot
Yeah.
specifically, they don't have any reason to have a ballot question except for this MSBA item that has come up, and so they've asked if we're willing to help cover the cost.
Last night, speaking with Phillipston, that came up. We actually introduced it and folks who've been down have been doing it a while. It has been that the that the district, in these situations that has taken place, that
Special elections, that benefited the district has paid.
we estimate around $8,000 grand totally for both district, my misstating, I'll make sure I'm not, somewhere in that area. And they're going to give us more fixed costs. We did ask Templeton through the finance facilities meeting if they would at least consider splitting the cost. And we would, of course, do the same, but well, more to come on that, but I wanted to just kind of, it didn't really fit any of the agenda items, so I just wanted to say that we're talking about it, and, you know, obviously we need to get these things done, but I'll update you as soon as I have an answer, or we have an answer. Last but certainly not least, I honestly had the pleasure of giving the new town manager, Mr. James Ryan, a tour of the district yesterday. We spent about, 2.5 hours. We have 2 buildings, but we went through every nook and cranny of both buildings. We showed him the playing fields, kind of gave him, you know, the history as I knew it. Talked about roofing projects, talked about he had never seen a wood boiler, you know, a wood chip boiler, pardon me, for building this large. That was something, you know, to see. The elementary school obviously was his real target, because obviously it's the Templeton. He loved it, and very bright. He stopped and spoke with every teacher. Of course, at the elementary, that just going to draw a crowd, especially children. And so it was fun to watch that to happen. He asked about going into classrooms, and I said, I'm not allowed. And they said, what do you mean? The superintendent said, well, apparently it caused, you know, disruption when I go in. So, you know, the kindergarten and first grade. So we did go in, I was allowed to go to a couple of rooms, and they didn't cause too much disruption, but to give them a kind of lay of the land and just kind of show, you know, just to see, obviously. And so it was really productive. We had a lot of, you know, kind of great conversation all the way through. And he is really committed to really improving the communication between, you know, the town office, so to speak, and the district. I've already received 3 phone calls from him, just on different things. He gives me heads up after these select board meetings, anything to do with the school. So it's been, honestly, it was really great. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that, certainly on camera as well, that you know, he's really committed to, you know, improving certainly communication, but really wants to understand and wants to be invited to the things that we do, you know, more advanced, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to definitely put him on the calendar, make sure that he's at least, you know, he's busy, but, you know, to get him out here.
You have enrollment numbers attached?
Thank you. I was going to give a second. So this is different. It's the first, I will say right off the bat, that we are October 1 to October 1, FY 25 to FY 26. We are, our enrollment declined 75 students. That is the largest decline non-COVID since I've been here in one year. So what could it mean? Monty Tech took, you know, Monty Tech had, it's basically the same number of kids that they generally take, although I need to double check that, but that was around 25. There were 23, and the way I have to classify it until I really, folks don't need to really give us, you know, every bit of detail, but there were 23 moved or / returned to place of residence. What does that mean? Well, they actually, you know, moved. Or they were here and moved in, and so they thought they could be school choice, but they can't unless it's open. All right, so there's no more school choice in place, as you know, so, but ultimately, it might have been a custody thing, it might have been a lot of different things, but they were here at one point, but now they no longer are in terms of a physical presence, in terms of a house or an apartment. Okay, so we have seen an increase in homeschool students, well, just not just year over year, but just in general. But I'm gonna dig into. We had 13 school choice across the district. That's not a large number. School choice out, but we are now at 114 school choice students in. That's the lowest and better than, because we didn't open it up as much, or we just didn't, quite frankly, people just didn't want the school choice, whatever the case is. So there's no doubt. Held harmless. That will be in held harmless. There's no way that we have more students this year than we did last. That's no possible way. So, in enrollment numbers, we didn't come close. We have 100 kids coming in. So it's
Was the kindergarten class smaller
the
than?
smallest kindergarten class, probably in the last non-COVID 6 years, at least. We had close to 100 last year, and that was it was in the 90s, 80s. This is 70. It was 100 last year. That was the largest we had. And this year we have 71. So that's a huge, it's 30. It's literally 30, students fewer in the kindergarten. Now, we had a conversation in the town manager and I about just populations dropping, people having fewer children. I don't know if this is, reflective of that, who knows, but because we've been talking about these numbers and we'll see. But this is the first year we dropped absolutely below 85. And we'd have to really look at it. So, yeah.
Personal observation, I used to see houses list for sale and then they were off
Yep.
like this. Recently, I've been seeing those signs for much longer periods in front of the same houses,
The
so.
number of days, I forgot what the report is
Yeah.
called, but the number of days for sale, whatever, has grown exponentially. And where's
And
before?
while Templeton is still a very affordable town in comparison to, certainly some of those that are east of here. The prices of Templeton houses have really gone up over the last few years, and somehow we were gonna price out of the folks that typically move in, so.
Mhm.
I guess we'll have to wait and see whether this is.
Yeah, we don't know what this means.
What?
We've grown every year, last 6, or at least stayed even. And this is the first year we've had 8. It was 2 years ago, we were 8 students year over year. This is the first 75. We only were 100 fewer during COVID. To give you kind of this, apparent. We talked about occupancy. So, October 1, we used these numbers, but so the allowed occupancy and TES, okay, is set by the fire department and building inspector, 650. That's every soul, human being. We only have a max daily occupancy of 580 at this time. And of course, that factors in that pre-K students are not, except for one full day class, right? That they're there intermittently 4 hours. And we almost make that if they all were there, quite frankly. So we're, in terms of the occupancy, maybe concern, issue, or whatever it was or is, there's no worries that we are over, we're breaking the occupancy code there. We're well at this point in time, whereas last year, right up against it. So.
I have a question. For pre-K, they were going to kindergarten. Do you know what the number of pre-K students were last year? And did they all go into kindergarten?
So I don't know that because, it depends on, if they're 3 or 4 year olds, how many of them are there, but we're averaging 75 at least. Our total pre-K is 75. Our pre-K last year was around the same amount. I couldn't tell you how many 4s or 5s, factored into all that. That would be something probably for Terry, for me I could certainly find that out. We are seeing though, at the pre-K, which will be a conversation, absolutely be a conversation, is that the level of need of student that is coming into the pre-K right now it's tenfold. I don't think I'm even being close to exaggerating. We're having students come in with some pretty significant needs, and so we're gonna have to reflect on that. We're gonna have to look at and see how we're going to handle that, because it's we've at least increased. I don't know how many 1-to-1s at the elementary, but it's gonna
I
be.
sat and done one today, we're up to 63 pairs throughout the district.
by far, we are by
The
far.
highest I've ever seen it, but they're coming in based on IEP needs.
So it's not like we can, you know. So anyway, I can find that answer out, like how many kids matriculated from the pre-K program into, from last year. Or how many kids we have ready for kindergarten, like who will transit. I can find that out. On my reports, it's just really hard. Quite frankly, I don't break it down by the ages.
But kids can go to any preschool program.
Absolutely,
It's
so
not
that's-
necessarily indicative of what we have coming into the kindergarten program.
School choice also was a, not a concern, but it was a question about, well, why are you taking all these kids in school choice at the elementary? Well, just so we know. In terms of pure school choice students, we only had 4 last year. We had 4 school choice kids of all the elementary school, not counting the pre-K tuition. School choice kids, this year we have 10 at the elementary. So this is not, we're not, stacking a link cord, or whatever the case is, so there was 4 last year, it's 10 this year. We're plus 6 at the elementary. But we're actually, district-wide, we have 16 fewer school choice students than we did last year, and that's not, if you remember the whole presentation I did last year, so we have to look at that, we don't know how many happened in, we gotta figure that those are kids who just graduate, or, I don't know how many actually come in.
Any questions about enrollment? Being none. Into our agenda, there are no items unanticipated. Any school committee comments this evening?
Like,
Go ahead.
my kids thoroughly enjoyed the long so I'm pretty sure my son was one of the ones who was standing there for 15 minutes.
They wait, like, I'm not joking, they do like, they like this, they put it down, they look, they go away, someone come back, I'm turn it. And I'm just like, I want to video all of this because watching this perfect pumpkin, trying to figure out this perfect pumpkin, it's just, some of it is just absolutely, it's just so much, it's just too fun, it's too fun. It really is.
Really excited about hearing some of the things that are happening at the middle school too, of, YMCA and
Well, yeah.
I do have to go home and ask some other residents of my household about dance that they failed to mention to me, so.
Here's letter as well, citizens.
Yes. So I will admit I'm behind my reading. So I do a lot of school committee reading and then it's like, oh wait, I have to catch up on theory reading too.
I just know if she doesn't remember, you can
Oh.
have the information there too.
It's the he of my family. So.
And by the way, Miss Landry is quite the YMCA dancer.
Oh, all right. Love to keep this in mind.
We may have a video.
So finance and facilities did meet last week. It was the first meeting that our Templeton non-voting member was able to join us. And so it was a good kicking off point to a lot of different great discussions around what's happening with the buildings, capital projects, for folks who are always curious about what's happening with the elementary school playground. I know that was one in particular that the district shared with the town of Templeton, who was looking for their capital projects. Submitting was by the end, okay, yeah, and so that one is amongst the ones that will be submitting. There's also the Lovely Bird issue that Templeton Elementary faces, that the police station faced prior to us. Glad the birds could move next door, not glad the birds could move next door, but good discussions around the MSBA project, and just general review of finances, but Anne Marie's already gone.
We're submitting for the bulletproof glass.
Yes, bulletproof glass
And
and
the window in the vestibule.
yes, good ad, thank you for reminding me of that. District operations beyond policy, any particular?
We reviewed the 2 policies that we discussed tonight, and we'll continue to review policies as they come up or issues and dive into data, look at that.
Perfect. We have our first, Labor Management Committee meeting with WEC coming up on Monday. We have not yet been able to schedule one with LMC. For those who are newer to the committee, WEC is, our union meeting with the UFCW, which has, custodial, administrative, paras, and cafeteria, employees. And then LMC is within DEA. And so what those meetings are is they are not about contractor negotiations. What they are is for resolving minor issues that are not contract related that come up in between contracts, such that, you know, they help us to build relationships, and they also help us to make sure that little things are not coming in and causing irritation where they don't need to be, and can be resolved quickly and in a timely. So my best example is always, there was a particular year that the teachers didn't have sufficient, they had access to one bathroom and they needed more bathroom access. Just based on how the building configuration had been that particular year, and that's something we were able to quickly and easily resolve without it becoming any sort of a complaint that needed to be resolved. So it's that space where easy things come up that we quickly work through and get a resolution for. CPAC, any updates from CPAC this evening?
I don't know if they have a meeting schedule, or maybe I missed them. I had an email, so I don't know.
We will catch up next time. How's that? PTO, that sits with Sean, and he is officiating a wedding this evening. So not able to attend. Student Advisory Council, that is Peter, and he had a conflict as well. Legislative representative would normally be Danielle. The only thing I will state here is we're keeping a very close eye on federal grants coming in, especially with the dissolution of the special education department and the education department, which could result in delayed funds coming through.
They keep telling us that we're all set for this year because this year's money is funded by the feds last year.
Okay.
It would be, for us, it would be our next year's money is what Desi keeps telling us.
And those are pretty, out of the funding we received, those are pretty significant in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, that would be, that's definitely a hole that we're looking down and we're concerned about. Yeah, every school district, everywhere across the nation is looking at that and concerned about it. So, knowing that a lot of school eyes are on it, I thought it would be good that I at least brought it up at this table so we understand this year and next year, at least to the degree that we can. All right. So our next school committee meeting is actually so the way that we schedule meetings is we meet every third Thursday of the month, unless there's like a school vacation or something that gets impacted. And then we ask school committee members like, hey, just keep that first Thursday, kind of not free, but be prepared that we might call a meeting if we need to take care of some business. We have the MSBA coming up, so we have some business. And so we did check and we have quorum for November 6th for that specific purpose, to make sure that we can get that MSBA vote in and get that language over to our towns in a timely manner. We do need executive session this evening, and I will read the full motion, but just so that it's noted, we will return into public session at the end of executive session. So I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session as per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for reason number 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The meeting will return into open session immediately following. So moved. Motion by Heather, second by Bill, roll call vote, Hank,
I,
Sylvia,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
Bill,
I
and I say yes, so that is unanimous, so we will move into executive session and then we will return. We don't. Thank you, everyone. We have returned to public session, and we will repeat the vote as reviewed in executive session. So to just let everyone know, we were reviewing executive session minutes from the previous meeting, and now we will repeat that vote. So I would entertain a motion to approve the executive session meetings from Thursday, August 21st, 2025, as written. Including release to the public, but pending any redaction that's deemed necessary by legal. So moved. Motion by Heather, second by Bill. We will repeat that roll call vote. Hank?
Aye.
Sylvia? Heather?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And I say yes, so that is unanimous. There is no further business this evening, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Hank, second by Bill, all in favor? And thank you, everyone. That concludes our meeting.